This is 180 milliseconds too late, the SSA Rocket League podcast. Last week, I posted a video about orgs and rosters and asked the question, why are they so fickle? And that came out of the experience of SSA Rocket League in RLCS, our first season in the quote-unquote big time, and just seeing the number of rosters that turned over, orgs that came in, orgs that came out. We had some great ones that were there through most of the season, most notably, of course, Orlando Pirates, and then followed by Bravado Gaming. But there is clearly some work to be done for orgs to become established, for rosters to become established, and for the two of those to have a happy meeting in the middle. And someone on Twitter, I think it was Hannibal from the Bros, suggested, like, can't we get established orgs or successful orgs to come and have what about we learn from them? What's their story? How have they done what they're doing? Which I thought was a great idea. So I put out a thing on Twitter, and I got two fabulous people to come and join me and to discuss just that. And so joining me today, we have Perpetrate, who's from Pioneers, and a story I'm keen to get into because they're the Kansas City Pioneers, now just Pioneers. So they're very much Kansas City, but now they have an OCE Rocket League roster. So there's a fascinating story there. And Perpetrate is the director of Esports there. And then we have Mr. Jeff. Here lies Jeff. Jeff from Williams Resolve, or Resolve RSVGG. He's the CEO of that, and both of these orgs been around, and I'm sure had their challenges. I'm sure still have their challenges, but we're going to find out about that, and hopefully we can take some lessons, and there's some value to be gained for the SSA region. We're new in Rocket League. We're trying to figure it all out, and hopefully this helps. So, gentlemen, firstly, thank you for taking time out of what must be busy schedules, and early in the morning for you, Perp, and sort of around the same time as me, Jeff. So, guys, thank you very much.
Pleasure. No, glad to be here.
Yeah, same.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's get it underway, and let's start. One of the first questions I want to ask, which is nice because it leads into an introduction. And Perpetrate, I'm going to start with you. So the question that came in via Twitter was, how about a little bit of an introduction? So tell us about KCP, the Pioneers, how you went from being brand new to an established org, a known org, certainly within RLCS, the RLCS world. So over to you for that.
Yeah, sure thing. So Pioneers, Kansas City Pioneers, guys, we've, officially have transitioned over to just being the Pioneers, but our mantra is Kansas City founded, globally driven. And what that means to us is, our base, our home is always going to be Kansas City. That's always where we're going to represent. But now we're pursuing a global market in esports. We're wanting to go worldwide. We want teams from all over the world coming in to compete under the premier esports organization in the Midwest. So that's really our overall goal. But Pioneer started in 2019. It was founded by LJ Brown, Mark Josie, Alex Laughlin, and Sam Kulikov, which are some of our staff and leadership team. They founded in 2019, really took their time building up Pioneers. Eventually what they did was they brought on more people, including myself, and a few more valuable assets that have done a great job in building the Pioneers to where it is today. I couldn't be more thankful than to be a part of Pioneers. I've been involved now for almost 2 years. We've had our ups and downs, just as every business does, but I think we've done a great job managing, going from just being kind of locally based to now having a team that's competing in RLCS in Australia, having a Splitgate team that's competing internationally, and more rosters to come. So it's a super exciting process. I'm thankful to be here, and yeah, that's it for me there.
Fabulous. And okay, so then now going over to you, Jeff. I know there's Resolve, there's Williams Gaming. There's been a partnership that's been very successful. I know some of my sort of caster colleagues, people I've worked with, people like Months, who just absolutely loves Williams Resolve and working with you guys and the sort of the culture you have there. So you come highly recommended from that point of view, or from that side of things. So Jeff, give us the intro. Resolve, Williams Racing, Williams Resolve, what's it all about? What's the journey been so far?
Yeah, there's a lot of brands mashed together there, isn't there? Okay, so so basically, I run Resolve. I'm the chief operating officer of Resolve, which is an esports team that operates here in the UK, and we have a partnership with Williams Racing, which is the F1 team, the team competing in Formula One, and basically our partnership spans Rocket League and Fortnite, and together we run those teams in those different esports. So that's been a partnership for the last just over 12 months now, and then we extended the partnership recently to include Fortnite because it was just for Rocket League last season. Yeah, and last season was Resolve's first season in Rocket League. However, it wasn't mine. I used to run an organisation called Barrage. We had a couple of different Rocket League rosters in our time. Rise, who plays for Moist, used to play for myself. And the team that we had last season was a French roster, full French roster, which was Radisson, Prime, and Sizen initially. Radisson went to Vitality, and then we brought in Stake from Carmine Corp to round out the season.
All right, great. So that gives us the bigger picture now, and I do realize some of these questions as we go along. You are free to not answer them on, I understand some of these things can be a little touchy, B, entering into maybe sort of corporate issues and whatever, so feel free to take the fifth, even though that doesn't exist in anywhere outside. Well, for you Eddie, you can take the fifth, and then the Jeff can take whatever he needs to. So the question, well, let's start with the big question, which is the issue of paying players and rosters. There's a few. Well, at least here there seems to be a few ways to do it. Either a sort of steady salary, and we take a big chunk of the winnings, or the other way around. But how do you get to a point where financially it makes sense for the rosters and also makes sense for the organization? Because as great as lofty as our goals want to be and perpetrate, you were talking to this about being inclusive and building things that are exciting from that point of view, but we got to get paid. There has to be money involved. So I think I'll just take it one at a time. So let's start with you, Perpetrate, your thoughts, or as much as you can tell us, the pioneer approach to that.
Yeah, I would say overall it's really a group effort. Not only is it something that just takes the organization and making sure that the players are maximizing, content, promoting sponsors, competing at the highest level on a consistent basis. It's a factor of a bunch of things, but overall, it really is a group effort. It's going to take maximum effort from players, making sure that they're, representing the brand to the maximum ability, making sure that players are, creating content. And content is a super underrated part of bringing in revenue to our organization, and super underrated part to the esports community that don't understand that content is a big revenue driver for organizations. Yes, we can make revenue from tournament winnings, but it's not really the biggest factor to driving our business to future success. That really comes from content and players building their futures out, working with us on a weekly basis and creating content ideas, developing weekly strategies, and helping them grow their brands. Because at the end of the day, after esports, after competing in Rocket League, your brand is what's going to get you to that next level and keep you stable in esports and continue to build a career for yourself. So that's what we always want to encourage with our players, and I think it's an overall group effort with that.
That is such a fantastic answer, because it does play into a thought process I've been had around content. But all right, cool. And then Jeff, I don't know what you want to add to that.
I'm going to go for a completely different answer here. So excellent. I think the question specifically was around how do they do that whilst maintaining a profit, right? So the answer is we don't. I think the vast majority of esports organizations do not turn a profit. I think especially growing at the rate that we are as an industry and also as individual teams and organizations, there's always going to be a cost for that. And that doesn't mean that we make a profit right now. The overall profit and the overall gain for our investors and for us as a brand is in the value of the brand. So in the value of Williams Resolve in the next 5-10 years. We are effectively in esports now creating the next Manchester Uniteds, Barcelona's, Real Madrid's of the future. We are creating the big brands in sport that will be here for time to come. You know, the likes of Fnatic, 100 Thieves are already there to some extent. However, even they struggle to make a profit, certainly because of the amount that we spend on players and staff, etc., etc. That isn't to say that there isn't money in esports at all. There is. We are probably too reliant on sponsorship at this moment in time, just generally as an industry, and that's something that we need to get over. However, you look at traditional sports and the likes of media rights and stuff, and the payments that sports teams get through that is obviously huge revenue for them. You know, when the Premier League formed and they started earning money through media rights, that was huge for them. And I think we need to do something like that, you know, going further along. But obviously, you don't traditionally see esports on the television just yet. We are still very much an online Twitch-based viewership. So yeah, I think to answer the question, we don't make a profit. I think our players, we pay them monthly. Our players, the contract lengths change, the amount of prize pool changes depending on the org, the team, the esport, etc. But yeah, the reality is that esports teams don't make a profit currently, or very, very few do.
Well, then let me ask the question, staying with you, Jeff, because, okay, so you said we're probably too reliant on sponsorships, and so that probably plays a massive role. But what about, are there revenue options around merchandising? And then following on from what Perpetrate said, like the content creation, or maybe the content just is something to sell to sponsors. I'm not sure. And Perp, I'm going to come back to you on that. But so what are the other options to generate and create revenue that you see can be grown and built, or org should be thinking about?
Yeah, of course. I think content is key, like Perp said, around everything that you do. Why should anybody support you and your organisation if you don't show them what you're doing, if you don't promote yourselves properly? You need to create a storyline and, show them why you're different and give them something to get involved in and be part of. And I think that fans really buy into that, especially when you're transparent and open in that, and they can come on the journey with you. And obviously, sponsors love that as well. And obviously, you can generate revenue from that and say, oh, you can be featured in this documentary or whatever it is. But obviously, you can generate revenue from content alone, whether it be through Twitch subscriptions, through YouTube ad revenue, or whatever else it might be. And obviously you touched on merchandise there. That's another, revenue source. Although, you have to sell a lot of jerseys to make money, but players ultimately sell jerseys. If you're promoting your player in the right way, people want to follow the player. They want to buy a jersey with their name on the back, or they want to buy a special jersey that you have made for that player, or whatever it might be. Again, it's all about how you promote those and yeah, I think content kind of flows around everything, and the marketing, I guess, of that.
Okay, and Perpetrate, I don't know if you want to add to that, because you were talking the content, and I don't know how big KCP is or the Pioneers are with merchandise and that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I just think overall content just builds community, and I think that's an important start to making sure that, and ensuring your business is heading towards profitability, is building that fan base, building that consistent community that's going to come back and support your merchandise, your players' content, your brand's content, and more. So that's why I think, working with your players on an individual level, but also on the team level, is super critical in the building of content and talking about bringing in profit. Because without content, it's really hard to generate any kind of revenue. I feel like it's hard for fans to find any kind of connection to your brand without any kind of strong, either you have a player that maybe creates content, of course if he comes on, like, he can bring his fans, but what's the long-term success in that? Overall, the long-term success is going to come from the organization really putting in the work, showcasing what we do on a day-to-day basis, and also ensuring our players are doing the same thing while representing. So
So that's given us the overall organizational view of how to approach these. Now I want to start getting into rosters themselves, because that's a hot topic. And now we're in roster mania all over the world while we wait for the new season to be announced for RLCS. But there is the question of, well, let's start with more broadly, what is the job of your roster, your players and your coach, and what are the responsibilities of the org? Is there a clear delineation? I mean, obviously the players are playing, but what do you expect from your players, and what should the players be expecting from the org? What do we do for each other in this symbiotic relationship? Jeff, we might as well kick off with you.
Yeah, no worries. I think it depends on the team, depends on the roster, of course. But for us next season, hopefully, fingers crossed, providing we get the roster we want, the team will hopefully be full time, so they'll be with us either online or in person. And that obviously depends on the roster, though. Our team last season wasn't full time; it was a part time team, and obviously, depending on your organisation, will depend on whether you're able to support a team of that level as well. And obviously salary will reflect whether they are full time or whether they're at university or college, or where they're placing in RLCS, etc. So I think from a player's perspective, it's interesting. I think what we want to do at Williams Resolve is we want to make their life the easiest that it possibly can be. So we want to allow them to focus on what they do best, which is playing the game. So we want to take away all the other stuff. We want to give them all the tools that they can in order to do what they do best, which is play the game. So going into the new season, we are obviously organising boot camps. We have our performance staff that are working with the team to ensure that, like, diet, exercise. We do a lot of, like, I say we, I'm talking about Alex, who's our head of performance here, putting words in his mouth here, but he does visualization stuff, meditation, lots of different things that we basically give to the players and say, look, here's all the tools, and this is why they benefit you to use them or not use them. And then it's up to the players really whether they buy into that and want to use that and ultimately use that to help them improve their game. But yeah, I think from the organisation's perspective, it's our job to make their lives as easy as possible I guess as easy as possible. That they obviously still need to do their end of things. So play the game. It's obviously good from a player's perspective, to stream, to create content as well for their own personal brand, because you never know what will happen this season or the season after or whatever. And esports is typically a short career. I would say, you don't get many 30-year-olds playing esports. It's
That's
very much
sad, but very true.
Yeah. I mean, your typical players are in their late teens, early 20s. You don't get many after that. It's a shorter lifespan than traditional sports in some regards. So you have to make the most of that. You have to make yourself a personal brand that you can fall back on, that you can create content around, and basically, have revenue for the rest of your life, effectively, if you do it right. So I think it's important to help your players, educate them on that, and help them to do that as well. But yeah, it's the old-fashioned saying, though, isn't it? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So if your players don't want to do that, they don't want to do that. But that's what we try and encourage anyway.
And then, Perp, I'm interested in from your side of things, because you've got a team that's literally half a world away from you, and
yeah,
there's got to be how are you guys managing that process?
Yeah, I mean, like, similar to what Jeff said, it all depends on, like, the roster and the team that you have. But with our guys, right, we picked them up super young. They're only 16. They didn't have much experience on the international stage. if any at all, right? And then on the regional stage, they never really made it to go all the way to land. So when we first picked them up, our goal, our job was to give them as many resources as possible to ensure they succeed. As young kids, those guys are going to need proper coaching, proper management, and proper support from an organization in order to ensure their success. But not only that, they work extremely hard on, day in and day out. They're young, but they put in so much time to the game. So as an organization, just us supporting them as best as we can was super critical. We hired Threes as our first performance coach. We brought him in. But before that, we had Prof, who was our mental performance coach, and he worked with those boys really closely, gave them schedules that they had at land. We had boot camp schedules for them waking up, nutritional guides, making sure that they were eating properly. We do our best job in ensuring those guys are taken care of, and I think that the resources that we were able to provide them with really helped jumpstart their success. And I think what they did was they just really took advantage of those resources and made the best out of it, and have shown great success so far. I think this is, honestly just a start for them with being such a young roster. And with us being across the pond, it can be difficult, right? Keeping that communication, maintaining. But I think the best thing that we can do in ensuring that is just preparing all the time, making sure that we're scheduling meetings weeks ahead with the team, making sure that we're having open lines of communication with them, dropping in just Discord messaging them, hey, what's up, boys? Like, just checking in. Little things like that. Just since we can't physically be there with them on a consistent basis, it's just best that we keep that communication online as top tier as we can.
All right. There's a couple of things both of you have mentioned that I want to circle back to, but I now want to try and strip it down to a very basic level, because I'm long-term here trying to solve or trying to find ways of how this region, which is certainly in the Rocket League context, trying to find its way, trying to become established and hopefully mature as quickly as possible. And we want to learn from mistakes that have been made. So my observation here is that there are two kinds of orgs. There's orgs made up of young people who decide they want to have an org, and they literally give themselves a name and throw together a logo and say, okay, now we're an org, and then they get a couple of people to play the game with no, and is there a place for that? But when you're starting with kind of nothing, okay, so that's on the one end. On the other, you've got orgs that have been around a while. We've got Bravado Gaming here who have teams in a number of titles, and I'm not entirely sure how they run their business, how they are succeeding. New orgs, DNMK, well, they're the orgs that seem to have more of a structure, more thought through. Maybe they've got investors on board early on, but from your perspectives, how do we go from this sort of, how do we kind of bootstrap, go from where we are and build an org? And I don't know if that question is so broad and vague that you're going to be able to answer, but Perpetrate, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's very broad because there's a lot of different aspects into ensuring that your org can succeed and are taking the right steps, but it really starts with the people. Making sure that you have the right people in charge that are leading the brand, people with experience, people with, even if you don't have, let's say, esports experience, if you don't have experience working with a tier 1 organization, that's fine. But as long as you have some kind of business experience, educational experience that can provide value to your organization, I think it's super critical to have those kind of people on board when you're starting off, because it can get really tricky if you don't have if you have inexperienced people in the forefront. I've been a part of different projects where it can be super unorganized. Things aren't being detailed properly enough, and just a lot of small mistakes that cause brands to slowly demise, or brands slowly not to be able to keep that consistent level that they're looking for. Whereas with Pioneers, we're super structured. Our leadership team did a good job of starting us off the right way, making sure things are, from meetings to player meetings and more, are just super scheduled, super laid out for us. And I think it just really starts with the people that you bring on.
All right, and then Jeff, I'd like you to add on to that, but also from your perspective, what are like the top 3 challenges that a new org is going to run into, or a budding org, an org looking to establish itself, like, and three's a fairly arbitrary number I've thought of, but
yeah,
like the top challenges and what should they be thinking about that they're not necessarily thinking about when they're just excited about throwing together a roster.
Yeah, it's really difficult these days starting up an organisation. Maybe not so much in SSA right now because it's not as established. However, certainly, you know, in the UK or NA or wherever, it's really difficult. You know, there's some big players and they've got a lot of money behind them. So starting up, if you have not got either a big name behind you or you know, a considerable amount of capital, you know, money to go and buy players or do whatever you need to do, it's really difficult. It's a really difficult industry to get started in. And obviously, you know, like I just said, it's difficult to profit and earn money. So from an investment perspective, they don't always get it. They want to dip in and dip out, and that doesn't really work in esports from an investor side of things. So I'm going to go with that one being the number one issue, I suppose. And then, you know, to touch on what Perp said, knowledge is the big one as well. If you're starting out and you are a bedroom organization, knowledge is key. You're always learning. You know, I was there. I ran a team that I started from the ground previously, and you constantly fail, constantly learn, and that's kind of just what you've got to accept. Esports is a roller coaster at the best of times. Like, even when you've got the budget behind you, like, just, you know, trying to navigate the space sometimes is horrific. And I think it's about learning to provide value for less. So you learn ways in which you could provide value to your players that don't cost you money, they cost you time, obviously. And I think, you know, learning about those sorts of things, you'll slowly pick those up. But knowledge is definitely one of the big ones.
I have a quick follow-up question on something I thought of while you were saying, because clearly you sound like you've started the bedroom organization, as you said, sort of starting with nothing. What kept you going? Because there must have been dark times and massive disappointments. You know, it's all very well to preach the philosophy of you know, learn from your failures and move on, but it's really hard when you're in the middle of a failure. So why did you carry on when there were probably good reasons not to? Sorry, go ahead.
I said I think I'm just stubborn, to be honest. I don't know when I'm beaten. I don't know, to be perfectly honest. I think you've just got to have a really good mental attitude towards it and understand what you're building it towards. You know, whether that is, everyone sets such massive goals for themselves rather than just setting short-term goals, hitting it, setting the next goal, hitting it. And I think that's where you fail, is you set your goal way too high and then you don't get there. And you're like, oh, I'm never going to get there, I'm done. But if you are constantly growing, constantly setting short-term goals and achieving those, then it's more rewarding, you know. So yeah, it's you have to have a very strong mental attitude, though. Like, that's for sure. Yeah, that's the key.
All right, fine. Then let's cycle back to the you mentioned this, Jeff. Yeah, esport is a short career if you're a pro player. You've got, at best, probably 5 years there or there around at the longer term. And how does that impact the players? I mean, when you're contracting a player, is there, you know, someone on Twitter someone said, oh, we should get players to sign 2-year contracts. And I went, you're asking a 16-year-old to sign a 2-year contract. That's 15% of the entire time they've been alive that they've got to, so what are you looking at when you're like, okay, we're going to take a roster? Is there a thought that, okay, we're going to be together for 2 years, we're going to build you up, we're going to take you to the top, or how does that work, Jeff?
Yeah, so I mean, 2-year contracts is something that we're looking at this season.
Really?
It's something that we want to do. Yeah, and I think you look at players like, I'm going to use Moist as the example here. So the guys from Moist that were at KSO, all very young roster, you know, Rise being the oldest one of the bunch at 18, and they kind of came out of nowhere. You know, Joyo and Vatira 15 and 16, absolute wonder kids, just appeared out of nowhere. And you want players like that if you are contracting young players, especially that have got that potential to grow, you want to keep those. You know, I'm going to go with it. The money that Vatira has just been sold for from Moist to K Corp is rumored to be about 200,000, which is a crazy amount of money considering that's what was rumored the whole roster cost Moist. So that's a great bit of business. And if you are contracting players long term at a young age, you know, from a business perspective, you want to be able to have the option to cash out on those as well. If you're developing the talent and you're going to spend the time and money putting into these players, then you want that long-term investment in them as well, you know, and that option there. So, yeah.
Okay, and then my additional question on top of that is now getting into how much work is done. 15, 16-year-olds, all they want to do is play the game. They want to be superstars. They want to make it to the top and earn. They see the potential of earning money, of being incredibly famous or infamous. There's all of those. But how are we looking after their interests? Are you guys dealing with having conversations with parents? How are we making
100%.
sure that they're being protected?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's being really involved with both the players and the parents. The parents are really engaged in making sure that, you know, their kids' futures are headed towards the right path. And we do a great job of wanting to work with the players and making sure that they understand that, hey guys, like, you know, at the end of the day, our goal is we understand you're young players. We want to help you guys go onto the path of success the right way. And I think their parents do a super great job of engaging with us on a weekly basis and making sure that the communication is great between us and them, and making sure they feel good about, you know, the direction that their kids are headed into when it comes to creating content, the kind of content they're putting out, when it comes to the amount of practice hours they're putting in. You know, we have to work in alignment with them because at the end of the day, right, these kids are super young. They have things like school that are a priority. They have, you know, gaming that's a priority. It's a lot to juggle and it can be difficult. So it's really important for us, at least as the Pioneers, when we're working with like the 16-year-olds that we have now, and connecting with their parents as much as we can and connect. I think our Rocket League manager, Kat Jean, she does a phenomenal job in working with the parents as much as she can, and making sure that she understands what the players' schedules are on a weekly basis, so we know, because they go to school still while competing. It's not easy to get a wrangle of them at times. So it's super critical for us to work with both them and the parents.
All right, and then what about, because the other factor of dealing with very young people who are really good at the game, and I'm sure it's not unique to Rocket League, is the egos. The egos inflate along with the MMR, and I think there has to be a misconception by, you know, a young person playing the game and they go, oh, I'm going to have an org and I'm going to play with. So you want to play with your buddies, but inevitably there's going to be the egos and problems that arise there. So perhaps staying with you, how are you managing the egos and potentially massive egos and the tension that then is created between rosters?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It's super difficult at times, right? Because these guys are young, they're confident, and they're super skilled. They have the skill to back it up. Like, they don't, you know, at times they can feel like they don't have to maybe put in as much work as another team does due to them already feeling like they're at that level or already feeling like they've done enough. But we luckily have a great coaching staff on board. Our mental performance coach, Isaac, also known as Prof, does a great job in working with the team and ensuring that those guys' mental focuses are just top tier. It's not easy working with younger talent and keeping their mental sharp. We've had moments on LAN where situations can fall out, you know, after matches, before matches. With them being younger, you know, mentals can be a little bit more sensitive or fragile, depending on what's going on around them. So having that mental performance coach there is super critical for us in ensuring that, you know, we let the boys know, hey, we have a resource here who's going to make sure that he's talking it through with you guys, walking through, you know, steps into calming them down, steps into motivating them, steps into making sure their mentals are right heading into game day. just does a great job all around. And I think that is just super important into ensuring that the players' mental stay top tier and that they're not letting their egos or cockiness overtake hard work. And a mental performance coach and our coaching staff do a great job of maintaining that. So,
all right. And then, Jeff, a problem that did manifest for us is, and one of the issues is, because we're kind of newer and don't have much experience with this, players get very excited when they're offered anything. You know, it's like, oh, we're going to pay you a little bit of money every month. You could play Rocket League. They're like, yeah, we'll take it. And they sign contracts that they're not necessarily reading. Or so that's one factor. The other is, even if it is a good contract, they don't fully appreciate what it means to be contracted. So yeah, I've signed a contract, but if I don't feel like playing with this roster anymore, I can just walk out the door and go do something else. And so I don't know how much of it, like how much is explained. Like, you know, this is. Do they understand, or how do you approach the understanding of their responsibilities in being a contracted player?
Yeah, I think it's difficult, especially with young players. I think that you have to sit down with them from the get-go and literally explain it out to them. I've sat down with players before and literally talked to them through the entire contract. You know, sat down with the team and said, right, this means this, this means this, this means this. And sometimes that's what you have to do. They are not easy to understand sometimes, contracts. They're like 20 pages long. They use words that perhaps young players don't understand or don't know what they mean necessarily. So it's really important that they understand what they're being asked of them, because they're not going to give you what you want if they don't even understand what they're signing. So I think that's really important. I think it's really important for players. You know, if you're a player signing a contract, get some representation, or get, you know, somebody from a legal background at least to look over it. You know, there are some really good player agents out there. There are some really bad ones as well. Yeah, get some advice from somebody that knows or has at least been there and can help you read through that as well, I would say, is probably the key. And from orgs, they need to do a better job of explaining what is expected from the players if they want the players to actually do what they want. So.
And then on a similar-ish sort of vein, I'm wondering what the approach... And I don't want to speak for any... I don't know how our local orgs are approaching putting together rosters, but I do get the sense, just from the casual conversations I've had, that there's something wrong in the approach, because when it all breaks down 2 months, 3 months, 6 months down the line, it's all, you know, you talk to the players and they go, oh, well, you know, the org, they were supposed to do this, or they weren't taking our calls. And then you talk to the org and they're like, oh, they weren't committed. And there's all this sort of finger pointing. And to me, it's hard. Jeff, you've said something important. The org's job has got to be to explain to the roster what their duties are, their responsibilities are, because all they're thinking is, I'm going to play the game. But the org, surely they have the broader view, the longer view for their own brand, for the org. And when you are putting together a roster, what is the thought process from an org standpoint? What are they trying to accomplish? It can't just be, great, I want to put this together and I want a top 4 team, a team that finishes in the top 4 at the end of the season. They better work hard and make it happen. There's a short-term approach. What is the better approach when putting a roster together?
Yeah, so I think Rocket League is a bit more unique to some of the other esports that I've worked in, where the rosters tend to just kind of build themselves in the off season, because players get together and they're like, I want to play with him, I want to play with him. So they kind of build themselves in the off season, unless you already have players signed, and that's where the organizations get more involved. You know, I mentioned obviously about 2-year contracts. Then if we say we want to make a change next season or whatever, we swap one player out, we are more involved in that process, because 2 of the players are definitely going to be here next season or whatever. And I think that the key is to, from the get-go, is about onboarding them right and getting your pre-onboarding work done correctly. So what we do with our players when we are going to be bringing them on board is we sit them down, we do personality testing with each of them. So Alex, again, this is his domain, but basically to see how they learn, how they understand, so that we can not only coach them better, but we also get an idea of how they're going to react to certain things, or how they like to learn, etc., etc. And then we also do an interview with all of our players prior to them signing any contracts. We sit them down, we get an idea of what their day-to-day like, what they need help with, what their home life is like, etc., etc. And then we can identify issues early that they might need support with. And I think that's one thing that orgs massively lack and massively overlook, is they forget about doing anything other than, oh, that player's really good, let's sign them. They sign them and then they start working with them. I think your work with a potential player and potential roster starts before pen has touched paper, basically.
And then, Perpetrate, coming to you, what do the Pioneers, what do you want out of the roster? As an org, what are you trying to gain by having the Pioneers Rocket League team?
Yeah, I say overall we look for just a roster that dedicates their time to their craft, and a roster that is going to give it 100% day in and day out. At the end of the day, we give the guys their resources they need. We provide them with, sponsorship product, from equipment to whatever they need to ensure their success. We just want them to utilize that to their maximum abilities, give 100%, and respect each other, respect one another. It's really not too much deeper than that when we look for out of our teams. I mean, honestly, I feel like majority of our teams, like similar to what Jeff said, we go through a really lengthy interview process before we even put pen to paper. So before then, we feel super confident in the teams we bring in, just because we feel like we got to know them as people. We got to know who they were. We got to kind of know, what they could develop into. If there's any potential for us to kind of, mold them into a better player, mold them into a better person, we look into that. So we do that a lot beforehand, and just ensuring that, we're comfortable with bringing them here before we commit to that. And then once they're here, it's just about giving it 100%, working hard every day, and respecting your teammates' time, respecting your management's time, your time, and just going hard. So that's really the main things for us.
All right. Sorry, I've just looked down at the time and I can't. A lot of time has disappeared very quickly. So as we start to wrap this up, and Perpetrate, I'd like to start with you on this sort of wrap up question. Is obviously our problems, the SSA problems, are not your problems, and I'm sure in Kansas City and more broadly in America, you've got your own challenges and problems, and likewise for you, Jeff. But we're looking to try and learn lessons here. So if you were, I guess your parting words, Perpetrate, is like, okay, if you're talking to orgs here, or people looking to establish orgs, or orgs that have been running for a while but struggling, and we want to do better for our players, we want to do better as a scene in Rocket League, your parting sage words of advice or thoughts about that, or what we should be doing and looking at?
Yeah, I would say overall, just take the approach of building longevity within the rosters and the teams that you guys have, with being a region that is still in development. I think that fans will grow attached to the SSA region when the teams become more consistent. They see the same rosters every event and see these rosters keep coming and performing. Create more content with your teams. Utilize, the market that you have. We're competing in Rocket League, which is, a tier 1 esport at this point. It's one of the fastest growing esports we've ever seen. Utilize that. You guys have a smaller region that is going to take time to develop. Similar to us, we're still in OCE. It's still going to take time to get it to, obviously, the NA and EU level. But the best thing that I can recommend is keep those rosters together as best as you can. Make sure that you're building storylines with these rosters. Create a relationship between the players and the fans. And I think that as long as the fans can get more comfortable with seeing these rosters continue to improve, similar how in OCE, right? People are looking forward to seeing how our young guys are going to develop in these next couple years. They're so young and they've shown so many flashes of greatness that people want to kind of see, you know, where they will go from here. And I think that's kind of the same approach SSA should take. You know, keep these rosters together, keep them formed, keep them strong, give them as much support as you can as an organization, help them create content, help these players start developing their brands. Like, it's super important. It's going to be super important to the growth of your region. And that would be the best advice I can give there for sure.
And it sounds legit and solid, Perpetrate. Thank you. And Jeff, and you'll pardon me for saying so. You look like a man of more experience. You've been around a few blocks. Your input in this?
I think I'm not sure how to take that one. I feel very old right now.
The best way possible.
Yeah, I think for the SSA region, look, if you're in Rocket League already, you're in a solid start. You're in a good place. I think Rocket League is one of the best esports going right now, both in terms of the TO support and Epic are obviously Epic and Psyonix are great. And I think that from an esport perspective, it is one of the simplest esports to understand, right? It's not like League of Legends where there's 2 million things going on, you've got to learn. You sit somebody down in front of Rocket League that has never watched esports before and you go, this is car football. And that is so simple to understand, right? So from a sponsor perspective, partner perspective, investor perspective, that's a great start. It's a great place to be. And then obviously the supporting game, with decals and all that sort of stuff, that'll obviously come to SSA as time goes on as well. So yeah, I think just to fail and stay strong and learn from it and move on, I think is the biggest thing that I can possibly give you. If you're an organization owner that you just started your own team or whatever, like, accept that you are gonna make mistakes, you are gonna get drama, things are gonna go wrong. It's about learning from that really and going, right, okay, maybe we could have done this better. I think a lot of the time we're like, oh, that player was really hard work. It was nothing, that wasn't my fault, etc., etc. But was there something that you could have done better? And as long as you learn from everything, then you never really fail. So I think that's the best way to look at everything. That's the best piece of advice I can give.
That's fabulous, and I think we'll wrap it up there. But I want to just say to you both that I'm enormously grateful that you've taken the time. I've found this incredibly beneficial, and honestly, I would like to steal a lot more of your time because I think there's great learnings here. Both of you have spoken about the subject of knowledge, and to add that from my perspective, for local people in SSA, is start making connections and contacts with people like Perpetrate and Jeff, and there are so many others that are doing great things in orgs, in esport, and develop the sort of relationship where you can pick their brains a bit or learn or reach out and ask specific questions. And I think we've got to accept that we are new at this in most respects, and there are so many others that have already done the failing. Let's not waste their crises, but let's learn the lessons that have been learned there. But what a great conversation. And so Jeff, Perpetrate, once again, thank you so much. This is enormously helpful and I think going to be very beneficial. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
An absolute pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your long day, Perpetrate. It's still early in the morning for you, Jeff. It's
early.
Maybe winding down, although this is esports. The day is never early, or it's never late, I beg your pardon. It's
24 hours.
Yeah. I have a feeling today will be especially long as well, so yeah. Yeah,
all right.
We'll see.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with it.
Thanks.
Guys, thank you very much. That's going to wrap it up from us. This has been 180 milliseconds too late, the SSA Rocket League podcast. To my guests, Perpetrate and Jeff, thank you.